Okay, folks, we're going to have a little bit of an educational lesson today. The difference between RAM and a hard drive. This is something a lot of people get confused by, so I'm going to make it really simple. I brought both. RAM, hard drive. Look nothing at all the same. But a lot of people get really confused about these two devices because their job in a computer is somewhat similar. They hold information. The difference is the amount of time that they hold it for. RAM stands for Random Access Memory. This is your short-term memory in your brain. The stuff that you did in the last 5 minutes all gets stored right here. The hard drive, on the other hand, is your long-term memory. Everything you did from the time you were born is stored here, or from the time you bought your computer. Scary, but true. These two things are necessary for a computer to run, and a lot of it comes down to speed. This takes a long time for it to read and write data. Now, I say long time, but that's really just based on perspective. In the computer's perspective, given how fast it computes information, this is slow. It's going to write it magnetically to these little disks that are spinning really, really fast inside of this whole square box. It stores immense amounts of data. This one actually isn't very big. It's a scrap one. It's only 160 gigabytes. It's kind of older. But that's a lot of data. I'm not going to do the math for you, but I'm going to pause and throw something in there that gives you an idea of how much data that is. Okay, makes sense? No? That's okay. Moving on. RAM is totally different. And off camera, you can't see it, but producer GN is laughing at me really hard, or at least stifling it. RAM does a completely different job though. What it does is that short-term memory, and so it takes the information from this hard drive, puts it here in just small little bitty chunks, and waits for the computer to need it. Now it doesn't just do this randomly against what the name says. It does this because the computer requests it and says, hey, I need this data off of here, but I need to use it a lot more quickly than what the hard drive will let it do. So it sits on this guy. Now, why is it important to have a lot of RAM and a lot of hard drive space? Okay, so the real big difference is that RAM, what it does is store information that the hard drive had long-term, but it's going to keep it here short-term while the computer thinks about it. Basically, the computer can't use information here at the speed it needs. I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but it's essentially the same thing as trying to read an entire novel or go over the Spark Notes in a sense. This picks out the pieces the computer needs to use. This holds the pieces of everything. So RAM, it's important to have a lot of RAM because the more of it you have, the more of those itty bits of pieces out of this guy it can hold at any given time, which means your computer isn't waiting for this guy to empty itself and reload itself and empty itself and reload itself with the new data it needs constantly. That's why if you're playing video games or watching video, stuff that requires a lot of information very quickly, more RAM helps it run more smoothly. Now, if you have a lot of stuff on your computer, all the family photos, all the videos, all the wonderful things we like to keep, our precious documents and such, larger hard drives help. We'll talk about buying hard drives later and really what you ought to be looking for your individual needs. But really, the general rule is it's cheap. Buy big ones now. It's going to be a good idea for you in the future. But again, more RAM, more hard drive. That's the basic thing. Two different items. Don't get confused when you go to Best Buy or Fry's or wherever your local electronics store and the guy says, hey, I've got a brand new computer with 16 gigs of RAM and 1,000 gigabyte hard drive, which is also called a terabyte. That sounds like big numbers. Don't get them interchanged because they don't work. You get the idea. Anyway. Lesson of the day.